Okay. Let's begin this meeting of the Ethics Commission in the city of Laredo. It's Friday, June 19th, 1:17. We'll take a roll call. Trying to name everybody, right?
Cicero Perez, the third.
Cicero Perez the third.
Adrian,
Saba Zapata. Present. Adriana Alexander.
present.
Mark Pease. Hector B. Patino.
Present.
Frank Castillo. Henry Herford. Elsa Gavan.
Present.
And Vidal Cantun, present. We have a quorum.
Members of the Commission, I did want to just point out that pursuant to Section 801I2 of the Ethics Code, the remaining members of the Commission that were not present today were not permitted under the code to take part in this agenda because the only thing on the agenda is a report that involves the council members that appointed them. So that is the reason that they are not here, and it's not because they're absent, so that shouldn't be counted again.
Well noted. Okay, got general citizen communication. Do we have anybody?
No.
Okay. Then we'll continue with the discussion and possible action on the following. Permitted by independent outside counsel, acting as ethics compliance officer.
Ethics report
Ethics
filed
report filed pursuant to section 2.11 of the Ethics Code related to Dr. Marte Martinez in his capacity as city council member and in-network
Management position
for the city of Laredo.
Again, members of the Commission, Christina Hale, City Attorney, acting as Ethics Compliance Officer. Again, because of the conflict of interest with the nature of the report, an outside counsel has been appointed. I believe that it is in the best interest to do so. So even though it's not a complaint and it's just a report, I thought to avoid any potential conflict of interest, I went ahead and appointed outside counsel. So at this time, I would like to pass it to the outside counsel, Francisco Gomez.
Very good.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
My name is Francisco Tamés, and as Ms. Hale just represented to you, I was selected as outside counsel to assist in evaluating the report that's before you and that you will consider today. And so what I did is I prepared a report that is in this blue bound folder for your review, and with your permission, I'd like to go over the facts, the sections of the code that are made the part of the report, and the response that Councilmember Martinez provided. In the report, you will see a couple of tabs, or a few tabs, and specifically tab A is we included a copy of Councilmember Martinez's response to the report. And for ease of reference, in tab B, tab C, and tab D are the relevant sections of the code that are made a part of that report and the allegations that were raised in the report. And so I'll be discussing those, but in case you need to refer to them, the language is there for your review.
Very good.
You'll also see exhibits 1, 2, and 3. Those are tabs 1, 2, and 3. And those are the exhibits that are referenced in the report and that assisted me, I guess, in doing the evaluation. So with your permission, I'd like to begin. The report that is filed and is before you for consideration today was prepared by Mayor Pete Saenz, Councilman George Algelt, and Councilwoman Nelly Vilma. The report alleges that there were some violations that were committed by Councilmember Martinez at a city council meeting held on June 10th, 2019. And specifically, that meeting was held before city council to discuss awarding the contract that was to be the general health insurance coverage for city employees. During the council meeting, there were two primary bidders. It was Aetna and Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas. What's important about the allegations was that Councilman Martinez was present during this meeting, was involved in the deliberations, asked questions of the representatives from Aetna and Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas. Now, at first glance, that seems normal. That's within his duties. However, Councilmember Martinez admittedly knew that he was what's considered to be a in-network physician for both Blue Cross and Blue Shield and Aetna. The reason that's significant is because when a doctor is considered to be in-network, that physician has a contract with the insurance company. The physician applies to be considered in-network and to be certified as being in-network. What that means basically is that the physician, the healthcare provider, agrees to charge patients that are covered by the insurance, the insured, a lesser rate, and in exchange, that physician is promoted within the insurance company as being in their network. And in fact, if you look at Exhibit 1 and 2, I provided copies of what Blue Cross and Blue Shield has in terms of doctors applying, the application process to be considered in-network. And that application considers those physicians to be in a contract with Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And also how those physicians are then marketed within Blue Cross and Blue Shield's webpage. And so Dr. Martinez appears as a pain management specialist. It has his address, his contact information, and it gives the insured the ability to contact his office to schedule appointments. Okay. So significantly in the report, and this is why it's before today, the code has section 2.01, and that's the first section that I'd like to go over with you today. Section 2.01, in order to not have a conflict of interest, requires a person who has any action that he or she knows will likely affect the economic interest of that person. And I'll discuss what that means in terms of the code of what economic interest means. The second section that I want to cover that's made part of the report, the complaint, is section 2.09. And that one is entitled Prohibited Interest in Contract. What this section provides is a little bit steeper. It's a little bit more, entails a little bit more action on behalf of the councilman. Section 209 makes it illegal for the person to have a willful relationship with a party that contracts with the city. And if you find that there's a willful violation of this code section, the remedy is that person has to be released from their position. Okay. So it's a little bit more serious, and we'll go over the interpretation of this section. Those two sections were explicitly mentioned in the report as being violated by Councilmember Martinez during that council meeting. The third violation that we're going to talk about is implicitly replied. In other words, it wasn't an express action or conduct, but because of the nature of the relationship between Councilmember Martinez and Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas, this violation, this code was violated, potentially. And that's something you'll have to consider by Blue Cross and Blue Shield, because what this section requires is if a third party comes before the city to offer their services, to contract with the city, they must disclose any potential conflict of relationship that company, that third party, may have with the city official. And so it's a very serious implication that's raised by the allegations that are made in the report, and it's important that we discuss that, especially in regard to the relationship that Blue Cross and Blue Shield has with the city through its contract. So at the end of the meeting, the council meeting at issue, the vote was forwarded, it was made, and Blue Cross and Blue Shield was awarded the contract. Okay,
What was the vote?
6-1, sir. And Councilwoman Martinez voted in favor.
So if Council Martinez would have not voted, that it would still gone to Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Potentially, yes, sir. Potentially, that's correct.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I was gonna ask, did you have an opportunity to talk to the councilman?
Yes, I did, Councilman Martinez. Yes, and so during the course of that conversation, I specifically wanted to find out a little bit more about his response. And I think what's important about it, and then we'll get into it in the discussion, is what was his state of mind? And what did he feel was his role and duty during the meeting? But we'll discuss in terms of his knowledge and whether he acted willfully in the way that he acted or did not act pursuant to the code.
Do you know if he was gonna be, did he express any interest in being present today in this meeting?
I believe he expressed interest in wanting to know when the meeting was going to be held, and I did send him a notice of a meeting, giving him an opportunity to provide me with additional information. I specifically asked him to be able to provide me the contract that he had with Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and to give me further information about what kind of resources he has been generating as an in-network physician with Blue Cross and Blue Shield. I did notify him that there were potential conflicts that may exist and his opportunity to be present.
Can I clarify, just, again, I'm still the outside counsel, so I advise this council just on the code itself and not specific.
But just a reminder,
This is a report and not a complaint, so I don't believe that they were served in the same manner that, you know, they're required to be here, so I don't even know if he received that notice that, the requirements, as well as the complainants. I don't know that they even did they receive a notification to be here, the complainants? Or the people who made the report that,
I think we sent a notice in.
because typically for a complaint, everyone's required to be here. So I'm not sure that those even went out because it's just an indirect report that was made. And if this commission finds that there is a violation, then this commission files the complaint as the complainant, and then there would be notice to be here.
Mr. Temes, back to the vote. Was Dr. Martinez advised that he had a conflict of interest if he would vote for the contract?
If he had been advised?
Was he advised before he voted?
That's a very good question, Commissioner. I don't know.
The mayor being the chair, it says, Mr. Martinez, you can't vote on this, nothing like that happened?
That's a good question, and I don't know that anybody, and that's something that I think is very important for you to consider in the sections. I don't know that the council members knew that he was an in-network member. Certainly, Councilmember Martinez did know, and he admitted that to me in the conversation that I had with him. He is listed in their directory, so he has been an in-network member of Blue Cross and Blue Shield between 8 and 10 years, according to what he told me.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Davis, I have a question also. You mentioned that Dr. Martinez did mention to you that he was in network with both of the providers that were being considered for this.
Yes, sir.
Now, I would imagine, but I'm not sure, I'm sure he's also in network with many other insurance companies as well, because I figure as a business, you know, you want to be available to as many as possible to try to get as much business as you possibly can. So it's not just specifically these two, but many others, I'm sure.
That's also an excellent point, and I believe that in terms of the remedial actions that the commission would take, in order to make sure that we validate this contract and consider the importance of this contract, that is something that I took into consideration, because I think that is very important, specifically in the way that physicians work through insurance and healthcare providers.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So the first section that I'd like to go over is 2.01. I think that's the simplest one. And that's on page 8. That's where the legal discussion of section 2.01 begins. It's fairly straightforward. It just says to avoid a conflict of interest, the appearance and or risk of any impropriety, an official cannot take any action that he knows is likely to affect his economic interest. Economic interest is defined by section 102 of the code as being any legal or equitable property interest in intangibles and contractual rights. And it requires that it be more than just a minimum of some kind of value, okay? If the official, if councilman knew that he had this conflict, there's a few things that the code in 2.01A requires. Germane to this specific complaint is that he must immediately refrain from participating in the matter. And two, he must promptly disclose the conflict to other members of the council, board, or commission which he serves. So the question for you was, we know that because Dr. Martinez knows that he is in-house for both Blue Cross and Blue Shield and Aetna, the two bidders, he knew that he had an economic interest. And we'll discuss that a little bit further, but
Are we assuming that, or did he reveal that?
that he had an economic interest?
Yeah.
That is, I think, in the evidence that we have
Can you answer yes or no? Did he know?
I think it's clear he did know that he had an economic interest. And let me paraphrase that.
In your opinion?
No, sir. In the code, in section 2.09, an economic interest is also defined as being in any matter in which that official can vote for the approval of that contract. So there is, I think, circumstantial evidence that he knew he had an economic interest. He's been a participating doctor for 8 to 10 years. And I'll go through some evidence that shows that he has been paid by the city through TML for a separate type of in-house coverage. But the code itself makes it an economic interest when that particular council member can vote to approve that contract. That in itself is an economic interest. Okay, and so the code doesn't require that he have to prove that he does not. Simply by the fact that he participated in the vote, he has an economic interest. Okay. So the question for you then is, did the council member, one, immediately refrain from participating, and he did not? And two, did he advise the councilman that he had this conflict? Now, he told me that he did, and in the report that he filed, in the response that he filed, he says that he disclosed this fact. The record that I reviewed does not have any audible mention by the council member that he disclosed it. I don't have any evidence if he disclosed it in any other way, but we do know from the record that he did participate.
You mean in the meeting itself on the vote, he did not verbally say that he had a conflict of interest?
It's not audible. I reviewed the video and the written record, and it's not in either. So if he did, it's not audible. And so I cannot speak to that. I can only tell you what I heard and what he reports in his response.
Do you know if he reported it to the administration, to the city staff, or anyone, city managers, or anybody?
I don't have evidence of that. I don't.
No, excuse me, along with Mr. Patiño's question, did the city manager or maybe the mayor advise city attorney to look into that before an item agenda? Say, look, there's a possible conflict here, so we advise nothing.
No,
No red
no one
flag came
informed
up.
the city attorney's office. to
No
this.
red flag came up.
No.
Thank you.
Yes. And so what I wanted to point out, commissioners, was that there's another type of insurance coverage through TML that the city has when there's workers' compensation claims. That is a completely separate type of insurance, not the insurance that we're talking about, but I did want to use that as an example because we do have evidence of payments that have been made through that in-network insurance to Dr. Martinez to show that it is reasonable to suspect that he has also been paid as an in-network physician for Blue Cross Blue Shield. Okay, and so in what I did was I did contact Human Resources, and they were able to provide me records of the payments that have been made. In Exhibit 3, you will see charts that reflect the payments that have been made to Councilmember Martinez since he was made since he was became a city councilman. The city's records through TML, again, this is a separate insurance, but some evidence of a value he's received, is there have been 29 payments that have been made to Councilmember Martinez after he was sworn in as councilman, which is a value of $6,863 in payments that have been made to him.
Let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
When a new council member comes in, is there a class where they go through this process of understanding what conflict of interest directly, indirectly is?
Yes, Commissioner, there is, and I've discussed that because I think in terms of the remedial measures that you can consider, and I think this is the proper thing to do because of how slippery a slope we're talking about, and how easily it is to fall into a economic conflict of interest, is based on the evidence that I have. I think that would be the proper course to advise Councilman Martinez that he should take a course and review those code of ethics. Because of his business and the type of business and his relationship with third parties, that it would do him well to review those code of ethics to prevent that kind of problem in the future.
But my question is is there a training that every council member goes through? Before.
And can I there was an ordinance passed for council members to take that training, and but it came into effect afterwards. So,
And I think that's you know, I'm an attorney. I've been practicing for 19 years. And when I was looking at the code, it took me a while to flip through these different sections and to make sense of the different sections. And I'm an attorney. And so I can empathize with anybody who doesn't practice law to be able to make sense of the code. And the reason why I think this is important too is because if you look at Councilmember Martinez's performance and his actions during the council meeting, he seems genuinely concerned of doing the right thing. And we'll discuss it in 209 because that's the analysis that I went into in section 209, that violation. But he genuinely seems that his concern is to do the right thing for the citizens of Laredo and evaluating which is the right. I mean, he tells that the council members ask him as a doctor, what do you think? And he gives his opinion. So I think his heart is in the right place, but I just don't know I don't think anybody can expect to know this code inside and out, is what I'm trying to say. And I think that training would be beneficial.
What I have, let me say this, another concern that I do have.
Yes, sir.
Is how is it that the media got a hold of the report and it was all over social media, the ethics violation, and we didn't have it. And so whoever was the public officials who submitted the ethics violation and then went out to the media, that in itself is a violation. And so I see more of their intent to hurt or to, make it political rather than actually, you're talking about the intent of someone generally caring about people. But when someone goes out there and does things on purpose to hurt someone else, that's a totally different issue. And so when they make the report public for the commission, we all are, no one's getting paid. I know that there was a report where committees get food and plates. We never got on a plate. And so we are here as volunteers and we do our jobs and we get criticized all the time, social media and the media, for doing this type of job. It's very difficult. But what I have an issue is when people actually are public officials who do this to hurt our community as a whole. And so that's my only concern is, why is it that public officials are trying to hurt our community by making this report public before even the report being heard by our commission? So that's my 2 cents into that conversation. But just needed to say that because I think that this commission, I don't know if people understand, but there's no oversight. Our decision is final. If our decision stands, you would have to go to the district courts, to the 4th Court of Appeals, and the Texas Supreme Court to fight our decision. And recently our decision stood before the 4th Court of Appeals. And so this commission is one of the most important commissions in our community. It has to be respected. The integrity of this commission stands. And so when public officials come to this commission to use us for political gain, it's when I have a problem with that. Because we are not here to gain anything but to serve our community. And that, we would have to look into it, but I would like to look into who filed that report to the public and who made it public. How is it that these public officials make this report public before us being able to review it or do anything? So that would be another ethics violation in itself.
Violation altogether, yeah.
That's because the power of 209 to remove a public official from office from this commission is a very powerful message to this community. They need to understand what this commission stands and what it's for. And I don't think none of us here in this commission has ever done anything to, to play with this commission. This commission is a serious business. It is serious, and we all take it to heart. We do this voluntarily, and we come to these meetings and we do it with our integrity. And so I just want to make sure that if you're a public official and you're doing this, shame on you, because this is not what we are here for. So that's all.
Very good, very good.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
The section, the second section, and Commissioner, your message is not lost, and I don't think that I don't take it to heart. The preamble of the Code of Ethics is significant, and I reviewed it and know the importance of this commission. I think that especially in a democracy, your role in this code is very important for the public to continue to have trust in our public officials. And I certainly took that to heart when I did my job. I don't know. I really have no knowledge of what happened and why it happened. I looked at this in terms of what the report stated and looked at the code. And so I'm not privy to what happened for any political reasons or what have you. I just looked at the code and what was alleged. And I can only tell you that based on what I read and what was before me, that's my analysis. But you're right. This is a significantly important role for this commission. The second section that is alleged to have been violated is 2.09. And in this particular section, as you mentioned, Commissioner Patino, the code makes it improper for a city official to have a direct or indirect financial interest in any contract. And we've discussed that in reference to section 2.01. What is different about 2.09 that you pointed out, Commissioner, was the remedial measure. And in this particular section, if you find that there was a willful violation, then that official must terminate, his position must be terminated. Okay. So it is very severe. Not only that, but also that contract could be considered void as a remedial measure because of that improper relationship. So the strong language here in the operative word is willful. Was this a willful violation? And as we pointed out a little bit earlier, I don't find evidence of that. What I did was I looked at case law, because willful is not defined in the code. I looked at case law from the Texas State Commission of Judicial Conduct. And this particular commission, just like you, that at the state level reviews the conduct of judges to make a determination those judges have violated the judicial code of conduct, the ethics code for judges. And the way that willful is defined, and I hope that serves as a guide for you in making this determination, is that it has to be of ill will. Willful means bad faith, with an exact willful application or conduct to violate the law. And I think this is where that analysis of Councilman Martinez's behavior is important. Because when you see him in that commission meeting, he genuinely seems concerned that we're awarding the contract to the best bid, to the best insurance company that's going to give the best benefit to the employees. That's apparent. If this were a willful violation, you probably would see him hiding. You probably wouldn't see him at the forefront of those discussions. And so It's your decision, but I just don't have any evidence of the fact that he acted willfully. When I talk to him, and this is where I think he has a genuine misunderstanding, he sees that his relationship with Blue Cross and Blue Shield is not being contractual. In other words, he's saying, look, I'm just in network. And as you mentioned earlier, Commissioner, he says, that's the way I act with all different insurance companies. That's the way physicians work with these companies. Notwithstanding that there is an economic interest, he doesn't see it as a contract. And that's fair, he's not a lawyer. And we can't hold him to the high standard of knowing, is this really a contractual relationship where you have an economic interest? That is difficult for me to press upon the council. So I don't see any evidence of this being willful. The other question you must consider in 2.09 is then, do we vitiate the contract? Do we cancel the contract because of this? And what's helpful is that the code does have some exceptions to it. And what the code tells us is if there was only one bidder, then there is no problem in making sure that we can still give an okay to that contract. Now, in this case, there were two bidders. But what I think is significant is that council member was an in-house network physician for both. So whichever way he voted or didn't vote, it would be implemented. So I think that in all fairness, I don't know that I would ever consider his conduct as being willful. And I think that there's a way that this commission can look at this contract and say, we think it's fine. We think it's appropriate to let it stand. The other consideration for you today is this contract in the best interest of the city? And this is the general insurance coverage for all employees of the city. There can't be, I think, a more important contract, a more beneficial contract to the men and women that work for the city.
Well, when this went out for bid, I'm sure there were many other insurance companies that bid this, weren't there? And I'm sure it was vetted by some sort of a committee that came back and recommended to.
I think on the documents, the HR director is the one that went through that process.
The HR director went through the
The
vetting?
HR director kind of giving the.
Commissioners, I can only tell you what I saw during the meeting.
Right.
And I know that the city employees did go through a vetting process, and there were a lot of different considerations that went into the selection. I only know that there were two bidders. How many more provided bids, I don't know. But it does look like this was a long process, and there were a lot of different considerations that were taken into account. That is apparent from the record. Yes, sir.
So in the discussions during the meeting, it was only these two bidders that were even considered or even presented to council?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So yes, in all fairness to Councilman Martinez, I don't see this being as a willful violation.
Do you
I
know
don't
how
think there's
many
any.
insurances that his office accepts?
I'm sorry, sir?
How many insurances does his office accepts?
He said numerous. He says that he has that type of
It's not
relationship with
only-
numerous.
It's not only one or two.
That's
but
correct.
It didn't matter what insurance company the city opted to receive or to get a contract with, it didn't matter.
Yeah, and the two, like I said, the two that bid, he was in network.
Network anyway.
So either way he voted or did not vote, it would go to a company in which he was an in-network physician.
Do you know the cost between both insurances or not?
I think, and this is important, it is important for consideration, the way that Blue Cross and Blue Shield promoted its bid was that it was saving the city 73 cents on every dollar. So it was a substantial savings to the employees that Blue Cross and Blue Shield be chosen. Aetna promoted its services as having greater benefits in terms of being able to provide coverage in Mexico. It didn't make any stipulations that it would agree to a certain percentage of savings, which I think the council considered and ultimately voted for Blue Cross. So there was a lengthy, and Blue Cross also said that they had more doctors within their own in-network. That was also a key selling
Was
feature.
there a representative from insurances there?
Yes. And I think that is the most important and the last section that we must consider, because that is, that I think is something that we need to address. Yes, sir. Yes, there were two. There was, in this particular case, it was a representative from Blue Cross and a gentleman that represented a different group. It didn't say Aetna specifically, but I don't know if it's just a company that assists Aetna in these bidding processes. The last section that I think is very important that we consider, and because of who is involved, is section 4.02. This section is implied to have been violated because of the allegations. This section makes it improper for a third party, any company, that comes before the city council to disclose whether or not there is an conflict of interest with the city official. Now, admittedly, I don't have any direct evidence that Blue Cross and Blue Shield, the representative that made an appearance before the commissioners, before the city council, knew that Dr. Martinez was an in-house or in-network physician. I don't have direct evidence of that, but this is the indirect evidence. It's their directory. Blue Cross and Blue Shield has direct access to the directory of all the physicians that are in their network. So they knew in Laredo who were the in-network physicians. There are only 3 or 4 pain managed specialists in Laredo. Blue Cross and Blue Shield is a highly sophisticated insurance company that goes to bid to a lot of different local government units, their services. They know who sits in the council chair and who is going to be voting on that contract.
Who from the city was talking directly to Blue Cross Blue Shield and then?
That I know, sure.
Was it the HR director?
Yes.
Yes. Is she here today?
I'd asked, actually an assistant to go, she should.
So I don't have direct knowledge or evidence that they knew, but they should know.
They could have known.
They should know. They should know that this is a councilman that is a physician. As a matter of fact, Councilman Martinez was wearing his scrubs during the council meeting. And they should know, because of the level of sophistication of the company, that there's codes like this. Laredo's not the only municipality that has ethical codes. And so I think it's fair to put a higher standard on Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And I think this is where the commission can speak loudly, that whenever there's a company that comes before city council, that they do their due diligence and that they disclose, because that's a duty that's required by 4.02, that these companies tell the commissioners or tell the city council that there could be a potential conflict.
Did they tell the HR director?
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
So if it's the responsibility of the presenter, are they the ones that are in violation of this code?
Yes,
Not necessarily.
it's their duty. This places a duty on that third party to disclose that information. And so if there was a remedial measure that I could recommend to you, it would be to prepare a letter to Blue Cross and Blue Shield and let them know that this is a specific section of our code and that they have a duty to disclose any potential conflict that may arise in their dealings with the city. Because that puts the city in a difficult
But
situation.
let me add, that's in our solicitation, we actually give the forms, and any solicitation, we provide that section and the forms that they would need to file with our office. So they are aware, but they should be aware.
And these companies have lawyers. The insurance companies are notoriously well versed in the laws of the different sections that they deal with.
So in this section, the commission can recommend to terminate the contract.
Well, I think there's exceptions, and I would be cautious about terminating because of the fact that I think it's the good outweighs the bad. But I think that certainly you're in your right, Commissioner, to send a strongly worded letter to Blue Cross and Blue Shield, advising them that this has raised some serious concerns, their duty to disclose this information.
Can we find them?
That I don't know. The code does not say that. There is nothing in the code that says that.
You can
So what about-
anybody who does business with the city is subject to our, to the punishments, and one of them is fines. So
Right. I
that's a
misspoke. I'm sorry.
possibility.
So perhaps that's something that you would like to consider, Commissioner. In conclusion, as I really took to heart what you said, because I feel the same way when it comes to our ethics. I used to be on a state bar committee for ethical violations, and I stood as a chair of that commission in South Texas for our district. And so I have a section of the Rules of Professional Responsibility in my desk, and I refer to them very often. I take that responsibility, the ethical responsibility as a lawyer, to heart. And when you spoke about the importance of maintaining that level of integrity, I hear you, I understand. And so in conclusion, I want you to know that I find this job very important. And even though it's not rewarded publicly, it is a paramount importance that we maintain that level of ethical standards. In conclusion, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Did you have an opportunity to talk to Blue Cross Blue Shield?
I did not. I did not. And let me tell you, that would have been something that if we had more time, I would have considered. But I think there's sufficient sufficient information there. In litigation, sometimes we go through exhaustive discovery, and so you always want to try to find out more. But due to constraint of times, I think that what we have, I think is sufficient to make the recommendations and the findings that I have.
Let me ask you this, do you believe that Blue Cross Blue Shield knew that there was a conflict of interest?
They should have known. Whether they directly knew, I will reserve comment. But I definitely can tell you that they should know.
I mean, you just said that this company is very, very
Yes, sir.
sophisticated, and they have lawyers, and they know what they're doing.
If I would have had the opportunity, let's say this was a case in court, and I go through the whole discovery process, that can be lengthy, that is discovery that I would have wanted to do. I would have liked to ask this representative for emails, internal emails of any investigations they did, any information they had about the persons that were sitting on the council.
Do you know from the documents from the city that they disclosed the conflict of interest?
I'm sorry, sir.
From the documents that they have, when they're doing a contract, do they disclose this information?
Yes, and if as Ms. Hale has
But do you know any document that they disclosed that they knew that the
No, sir.
doctor was a network?
that I don't.
You don't have
That I don't. If you would like me to do additional discovery and look into this, I'm sure we can look into that.
I just think that because the type of company that they are, they should have known.
Yes, sir.
And so they're kind of blindsided in saying they're trying to do this contract, but in essence, they know that the doctor is in network. And so that in itself, if they knew and they're doing it maliciously, trying to say, well, no one's gonna see it or hear it, or no one's gonna know or know that the doctor is in scrubs and counsel, it's kind of obvious.
Yes, sir.
So they should have known.
Well, excuse me for interrupting, but, and I'm not sure if the request for the bid on this particular, the selection of the insurance and stuff follows the same guidelines as other, purchases that the city makes, but in that package, there is a conflict of interest, form that the bidder has to fill out. Yeah, and if there is any conflict of interest, they must reveal it at that point when they're putting in their bid. Now, was it Blue Cross and Blue Shield who put in the bid for this, or was it their agent who did that? Because then, we're really not sure where that falls, that blame falls from. But I read in the transcripts that you all provided to us. Now, given that, the agent is presenting just the packages that each one of the insurance companies provides to them so they could make the bid. But I'm not sure how that process works, but I know that there's a checks and balances in for the conflict of interest in the bid itself. So that's, I'm not sure if that came, if that was
Maybe the HR
something of
director,
relevance or if it wasn't.
maybe the HR director can answer that question, but I don't know.
I don't know.
The representative that presented on behalf of Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas was Cindy Sosa. She is the Director of Account Management for Blue Cross and Blue Shield. So it was directly, at least in the presentation, it was directly the account manager for Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
It wasn't an agent, a local
Yes, sir.
agent.
Yes, sir.
And
And I would expect, there was a different name of the company, and it escapes my mind right now, but the representative, and I can get that for you, it did not say that he was from Aetna. There was another name associated with his title. But my focus was directly with Ms. Sosa from Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Now, was this a renewal of a contract?
It was put out for bid.
So was it?
Is it considered a renewal, I guess,
It was put out there. So
for a new term?
Okay.
And so the term will expire in 2022.
Who had the bid, or who had that contract previously?
Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And I think if I understand where you're going with this. I think that's something to consider in 2022, you know, because I'm not sure I feel comfortable. I don't have direct knowledge, Commissioner, but they should have known.
And the recommendation would be, because if the commission would like to reset this for that purpose, to provide that information and to get off, the unknowns, we could have our HR director, present as well.
Okay.
Any other questions? If there aren't other questions, thank you for your time, and if there's anything else that I can do and assist you in review of this report, please let me know.
Will do. Thank you. Okay, at this time, I think, I know that we'd like to go into executive session, so, do I hear a motion?
Move, we move
Give
into
a second. Okay, all those in favor?
Before you do, I just want to clarify, you're going in under section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, consultation with attorney, so, Mr. Dundas would have to go in as well.
Correct.
Is there a way that the council member, I know that he made us out, he wanted to speak, is there a way for him to?
Oh,
speak?
yes, absolutely, I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
I'll love to
That
hear from
When
him.
should we,
Should
have
we,
you
you guys have a motion on the
executive session
table?
already, or do we?
Well, I would have to rescind my motion.
Then, yeah, I guess,
Let me rescind my motion on the executive session to Dr. Martinez.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chairperson,
Yes.
Mr. Chairwoman, and Commissioners, I'm Marta Martinez for the record, District 6 City Council member. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I know this is something that you do to ensure that that the ethics of the city of Laredo are upheld. You know, when I was elected as a physician. I was a practicing physician that that took every single major insurance. And you guys had a question about how many insurances I take probably about 100 insurances. Everything from workers' compensation through Cignas, every insurance, because that's my job is to ensure that I can take care of the patients of Laredo. When I got on council, I kept practicing as a physician in both roles. When this came to the attention of council, this bid had been placed before I think I even got on council, if I'm not mistaken. And so this was the tail end of a very large discussion. So I'm not sure whether there was really any way for any of the companies to have known that I was a council member as well as a physician until the very end. After they had submitted the proposals, most likely, and I'll let Mrs. Hale talk to that, or the HR director talk to them. Now, as far as myself, when I was sitting here debating this, ultimately what I was trying to decide is what was going to be the most cost-effective and beneficial contract for the city of Laredo. Not just for the city of Laredo, but my duty was to protect the employees of Laredo at that particular time. That was my duty. As I sat there, I was asked to give my opinion. As a physician who is a practicing physician who takes insurances of all major carriers, they felt that I was a expert, if you will, on insurances. And so the question was, can you give us some guidance as to what is going to be the best experience for the employees of Laredo? And that's what I did. I talked about pre-authorizations, who did a better job of coverage, the likelihood of having more physicians in network. And that, I think, is really a key and crucial thing here. Because, you know, I submit myself to the will of this commission, but I think it's very important to know that any kind of economic interest that is here is not really distinguishable from any other physician that can go out and submit an application to Blue Cross Blue Shield. There is no exclusivity here that says that I am the only provider because this is going to benefit me
in some
directly in
way.
some way.
This isn't the
This
case.
isn't the case.
I am a physician that contracted with Blue Cross Blue Shield and many other insurances since I was a resident. And after I was a resident, you have to renew and change where you're going to practice. And so this is something that's been with me for a long time. And any new doctor, whether it's sports medicine, pain medicine, orthopedics, they all have the exact same right to go in and apply. So there is no advantage or exclusivity in what I do. Anybody can do this. Any physician can do this as long as they have their proper medical malpractice or proper insurance. And so, to me, obviously, I did not find at the time, and even now, that I was doing anything that was in direct conflict of my duty as a city council member to ensure that the constituents of the district, the constituents of the city, the economics of the city, and the employees of the city receive the best deal possible. And that's what I fought for. And that's what I was asked to do by my fellow council members. So as I sit here and analyze and go back and try to figure out, was there something that I could have done different? Well, at the time we did ask. I said it out loud. Well, I take every major insurance, including these two. That's what I do. I'm a physician, a practicing physician. And that, at the time, was considered an advantage. It wasn't until much later, no red flags, much later, that it became a problem. Why? Why did that change when people were asking me to give my opinion, to change later to say that that was a violation? And so, what I don't like, as I stand here before you, is any time that this commission is weaponized. When a commission is weaponized, it loses the substance of what it truly means. And so I'm going to submit myself to the will, as I said it on, even when I was approached by the media. I know I've done nothing wrong, and I will go through the process. But what I did was defend the city of Laredo, and I'll continue to do that, to defend the city of Laredo, the employees of Laredo, and the citizens of Laredo. And I will continue also to serve as a physician, as I was elected, because that's what I am. I'm a physician and a city council member. And each one of us on council have a unique set of skills that allows us to be robust and multidimensional. Some are lawyers, some are real estate agents, others have business experience. I'm a physician. This was my time to give of my expertise, and I did. Just like with the COVID response, that was my time to give of my expertise, and I did. So that's all I have to say, but I will answer any questions that the commission may have. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay. I'll make the motion again that we go into executive session according to section 551.
Yes, .071, of the Texas Government Code.
Do I hear a second?
All in
Okay,
favor?
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, go into executive session at this time. It's 2:41 and we're out of executive session and back into regular session. Okay, what are the wishes of the commission?
I would like to, Commissioner, I would like to ask the city attorney concerning if the commission can file an ethics violation report on the fact that the information was disclosed to the media. And so, can the commission file an ethics violation report and have someone investigate that violation?
You can direct our office, since we are persons now with knowledge, and that is your wishes, that we could submit that report, and it's something that we would bring back to this commission for investigation and consideration.
And this is referring to the information that was provided, on this particular report before the commission even got a hold of it.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. I would like to make a motion, Commissioner, one on the section 201 and 209 on the council member. This would be my motion, based on the complaint made and the reports of the issues in the record before the commission and the ethics compliance officer report. The commission dismisses the complaint against the councilmember Martinez with the recommendation that Councilman Martinez attend a training regarding the City of Laredo Ethics Code of Ethics. And that would be my motion.
Second motion.
Okay, it's been moved in second.
Can I start clarification?
Or do we
The
have-
ordinance already requires it, so I'm not, do
Okay.
you want an additional training?
Additional training.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Noted.
I would like to also make another motion, and this is based on the complaint that I will make by the report from the record and the ethics complaints officer report. The ethics commission finds and recommends that the city attorney's office investigate if sufficient evidence exists, prepare report alleging and discussing the Blue Cross Blue Shields of Texas violated section 4.11 of the City of Laredo Code of Ethics by not disclosing the conflict of interest during the City of Laredo's council meetings and their discussion on June 10th, 2019 regarding their contract. And that's my motion.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed?
I would also try to make another motion, which is based on the complaint made in the report and the record of the ethics complaints officer report and the ethics commission, to find and recommend that the city attorney's office investigate if sufficient evidence exists and prepare a report alleging and discussing who or what parties involved in disclosing the information of the ethics violation to the public and to the media.
I second the motion.
Okay, been moved in second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, none. Okay, do we have anything else to discuss?
Nothing further.
If not, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
I second.
Moved in second. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.